In the middle of the night, a sharp pain twisted in my stomach. It hurt so much that I curled up on the bed, clutching my abdomen.
John Smith, can you get me a glass of water? My stomach hurts.
There was no immediate response. When I turned around, I realized John was no longer lying beside me. He had gone to see Emily Johnson again.
Of course, he's with her.
I sat up and gave a self-mocking laugh, then got up to make myself a cup of brown sugar water. I glanced at the clock, it was 1 a.m. I picked up my phone and called John, but there was no answer. After a while, John finally called back.
Honey, Emily wasn't feeling well, so I took her to the hospital. I didn't hear your call earlier. Don't worry, I'll be back soon.
He knew I was alone and afraid of the dark.
MM.
I hung up the phone and opened my notes.
July 24th, he went to take her to the doctor again, but I wasn't feeling well either. This was the 23rd time I lost him.
Afraid of the dark and with my stomach still hurting, I didn't fall asleep until after 4 a.m. When I woke up, it was already 1 p.m. John still hadn't come back. I wasn't angry, just very disappointed. John returned at 5 p.m., bringing a bowl of chicken soup with him.
Honey, come down and have some soup. You must be starving.
He stood tall at the door. I glanced at him and then closed my eyes again, pretending to sleep.
Look at you, so lazy. Luckily, you married me. I'm willing to take care of you. If it were someone else, you'd probably starve.
He was right. In the 2 years we've been married, I haven't cooked a single meal. He's always taken care of me. We used to have no problems, we were very much in love. But everything changed when Emily returned from abroad. She wasn't John's first love or his unforgettable crush. She was just someone who had pursued him in the past. Yet, this pursuer made me lose John time and time again.
You smell too strong. Let me down, I can walk myself.
What smell? I don't smell anything.
It was the scent of perfume, Emily's perfume. We were roommates in college, so I knew that scent all too well.
Emily's perfume.
John kissed my forehead, then carried me while saying,
I don't smell anything. My wife has the nose of a little puppy.
He placed me on a chair and sat across from me, ladling 2 spoonfuls of soup from the container.
Honey, I made this soup especially for you. It's still hot. Drink it up. It's that time of the month for you, so you need something warm.
See, he remembers my cycle better than I do. When I'm too lazy to walk, he carries me to eat. How could someone who loves me so much leave me for Emily time and time again? He knows Emily likes him. He knows how much I dislike her. Sarah Williams confronted John Smith with a heavy heart.
John, when will you stop going to see her? You know she likes you.
She paused, taking a deep breath.
Besides, have you forgotten what she did?
Emily Johnson, Sarah's college roommate, often appeared provocatively in her video calls with John.
Hey, Sarah, your boyfriend is really handsome, but how did he end up with you? Are you particularly good at something?
Sarah glared at her, anger boiling within.
Mind your own business and stop meddling in others' affairs.
Emily's face contorted with anger.
Sarah, you've crossed me. You'll regret this.
Sarah didn't grasp Emily's intentions at first, but soon realized she aimed to seduce John. Yet, Sarah's trust in John remained unshaken. The bond they shared since childhood seemed unbreakable.
No matter how stunning Emily is, or if she's the campus queen, I believe in John and our bond.
However, doubts began to creep in. Sarah wondered if their childhood bond could withstand the allure of someone new. After finishing her drink, Sarah watched as John went to the kitchen to wash the dishes.
Honey, after I finish the dishes, I need to go to Emily's place again. Her child is still young, and she's not well, so she can't manage everything.
Sarah's heart sank deeper.
I don't want you to go.
Don't be like this, honey. After all, she's a friend. If I can help, I should. I always feel like it's my fault she's in this situation. I owe her.
Sarah laughed bitterly.
A friend? What kind of friend deliberately tries to seduce someone else's boyfriend?
John felt indebted to Emily because he had rejected her confession, leading her to marry a wealthy man who later went bankrupt. Sarah stood up, walking over to hug him from behind, resting her head on his back.
Honey, what's wrong with you lately? Why do you seem unhappy every day?
John, I feel like I'm losing you.
He dried his hands, gently patting her head.
Honey, once Emily's child grows a bit older and she can work, I won't have to help her anymore, okay?
But Emily's child is not even a year old. How many years will you have to care for her?
John pursed his lips.
2 years. After 2 years, I won't care for her anymore.
Sarah removed his hand.
Forget it, do whatever you want.
John hugged her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder.
Honey, don't be mad. How about I go to her place less often in the future, only when absolutely necessary?
Hearing this, Sarah's heart softened. Just as she was about to nod in agreement, John's phone rang.
John, my light is broken. Can you come and fix it?
John glanced at Sarah, considering for a moment.
Okay, wait for me. I'll be right there.
Sarah went into the bedroom and locked the door. This was the 24th time. It was tiresome and meaningless. She picked up her phone, and after thinking for a long time, as I was packing my luggage, I heard the door open. I couldn't help but chuckle. This time he came back quite early, only about an hour or so.
What are you doing?
I didn't turn around and continued packing.
Sarah, please don't do this. I told you, once Emily's child grows up, I won't go to her place anymore. Just wait for 2 more years, and we can go back to the way things were.
But I don't want to wait anymore, John. I don't want my husband running off to someone else's place for no reason. I don't want my husband taking care of another woman when he should be with me.
John pressed his lips together and was silent for a moment.
All right, as long as you don't leave me, I won't go to Emily anymore. I'll arrange for someone else to take care of her.
He walked over and hugged me.
Sarah, I can't live without you.
Fine, John. This is the last time. If you can't keep your promise this time, I will truly leave you forever.
I had softened my heart for him 23 times. This was the 24th and final time. This time, Emily seemed to understand and didn't call John for several days. It felt like we were back to the way things used to be. However, something was strange. John seemed much busier than before. He used to come home on time, but now he worked late every day. Before, John would always have dinner ready when I got home from work, but now I came back to an empty house. Feeling bored, I called John, but he didn't answer. I called several more times, but still no response. I put down my phone, feeling an inexplicable sense of unease. Suddenly, I felt nauseous and rushed to the bathroom to vomit, but having not eaten all day, nothing came out. For the past few days, I had been feeling nauseous and my appetite had been getting worse. A thought suddenly crossed my mind. Could I be expecting? I hurried downstairs to the pharmacy and bought 2 tests. the results did not disappoint me. I was finally expecting. John and I had been trying for a child for years, but due to my health issues, it hadn't happened. I had been seeing doctors and taking medication, and now it had finally happened. I was overjoyed and couldn't wait to share the good news with John. I picked up my phone and saw that John hadn't called me back. He had only sent a brief message.
Almost done with work.
Never mind, I was in a good mood. I decided to go pick him up and share the good news, and then we could have a nice dinner out.
I drove to John's company, filled with anticipation. I wondered how he would react when he saw me and when he found out I was expecting. I was so excited that I almost ran a red light, but fortunately, I braked in time. My heart was pounding as I watched the traffic flow by. I needed to focus on driving. I almost had a serious accident today. When I arrived at John's company, I found it completely empty. Had I missed him? Had we crossed paths? I called John again, and this time he answered almost immediately.
Hello, honey.
John's voice was unusually quiet. There were no background noises, just his voice.
Are you done with work? Why aren't you home yet?
Not yet, almost done. Just need to finish this form.
Okay, then. You finish up, and I'll wait for you at home.
I hung up the phone and looked at the empty office, a bitter smile on my face.
He lied to me.
Sarah Williams sat alone in the dimly lit room, her mind racing with questions.
Where has he gone now? Has he gone to see Emily Johnson again?
She kept questioning herself over and over. She couldn't understand why someone who once loved her so deeply would deceive her. Sarah decided not to look for him. Instead, she stayed home, waiting for John Smith to return so she could confront him properly. That evening, John Smith returned from the hotel. Sarah made a point to sniff him. There was no trace of Emily Johnson's perfume on him.
Why have you been so busy with work lately?
There's a lot going on at the company right now, and I'm up for a promotion. I need to make a good impression.
After saying that, John went to take a shower. As soon as he left, Sarah hurriedly picked up his phone and opened his chat with Emily Johnson. To her surprise, their conversation history was completely empty.
This is very unusual.
She checked his transaction records and gasped upon seeing the number. John had transferred 300,000 yuan to Emily Johnson.
300,000 yuan? That's our combined salary for a whole year. Why would he give Emily Johnson so much money?
Suddenly, John's voice interrupted her thoughts.
Honey, what are you looking at?
Sarah was so focused that she didn't notice John coming out of the shower. But she didn't feel guilty for looking at his phone. She gripped the phone tighter and turned to confront him.
Why did you transfer so much money to Emily Johnson?
A flash of panic crossed John's otherwise indifferent eyes. He immediately snatched the phone from her.
Sarah Williams, why are you looking at my phone?
You haven't explained why you transferred so much money to Emily Johnson.
Their relationship was in trouble, especially now that Sarah was expecting.
Sarah, Emily is your roommate after all. We should help where we can.
So you're helping her because of me, is that it?
Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. She walked up to him and hit his chest with all her might, but she was too heartbroken to muster any real strength. John grabbed her hands.
Enough, Sarah. Stop making a scene. I've had a long day. Let's just go to sleep.
With that, he lay down on the bed, leaving Sarah standing there, feeling foolish. She walked to the living room, her stomach churning with nausea. She rushed to the bathroom and threw up. Looking up at the mirror, she saw her disheveled hair and pale face, hardly recognizing herself. After a long while, she walked back to the living room and sat on the sofa. The moonlight outside was bright and clear, casting a luminous glow into the room. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up and read the message.
This child is mine and John Smith's. I don't want to hide anymore. We have a child together, Sarah. I hope you understand and leave John Smith.
Sarah's body went rigid. So that's why John kept going to see Emily Johnson, because the child was theirs. He had a child all along, which explained why he never... Sarah stayed up all night, certain of her decision. She wanted a divorce from John Smith. But the child in her womb complicated things.
What will happen to my baby? I've longed for this child for so long.
After much contemplation, she decided to go to the hospital for a procedure. She couldn't provide a complete family or love for this child. Bringing him into the world would only harm him. At the hospital, Sarah noticed that everyone else was there with a partner, while she was alone. It didn't matter, she would be alone from now on anyway.
Life is truly ironic. I thought I was happy, only to discover that my husband had a child with someone else.
She had finally resolved to let go of the child she had longed for, but the doctor had other news.
I'm sorry, but you can't go through with it. Your health is already fragile. And if you do, you might never be able to have children again.
In the end, Sarah gave up. She would have the baby and raise him herself. When she returned home, John Smith had already left for work. Just as she sat down on the couch, the doorbell rang. She looked through the peephole and saw the last person she ever wanted to see, Emily Johnson, holding the child she had with John.
Emily, you really love picking up other people's discarded trash, don't you?
Nice place, but soon it will be mine.
To be so brazen about being the other woman, Emily, you truly are one of a kind.
Sarah, you have a sharp tongue, but what good does it do? You couldn't even keep your own husband.
Emily glanced at her daughter, and Sarah couldn't help but look too. The child bore a striking resemblance to John Smith. Just then, John Smith entered, his expression darkening with anger.
Emily, what are you doing here?
John, why are you back?
I asked you, what are you doing here?
Emily fell silent, her eyes darting around. She stammered.
John, how long were you planning to keep this from me?
John's body trembled, and he hurried over to grab Sarah's hand.
Sarah, I was wrong. I was drunk, and it was a terrible mistake. I've always loved only you.
Sarah pulled her hand away and slapped him, tears streaming down her face.
John, you're disgusting. We grew up together, and yet you.
John grabbed her shoulders, tears in his eyes.
Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong.
John, let's get a divorce. This time, I really mean it. I'm leaving you.
Emily's daughter started crying, and Emily quickly tried to soothe her.
Baby, don't cry, don't cry. John, our daughter is crying. Come and see her.
Get out.
Emily was startled, and the child was frightened too, crying even louder.
John, how can you do this?
Get out. I'm telling you again, get out.
John, you're too much.
Emily left with the child, and as Sarah watched her go, her legs gave out. Her vision went black, and she fainted. When I woke up again, I found myself lying in a hospital bed, the glaring lights hurting my eyes. I turned my head and saw John Smith sitting by my bedside, seemingly asleep. My nose tingled, and tears started to flow once more.
Honey, you're awake.
I stared blankly at the ceiling, not wanting to speak to him.
Honey, did you know you were expecting?
Yes.
Why didn't you tell me?
I looked up at John Smith, my voice cold.
Why should I tell you? Haven't you already had a child with someone else? Isn't your child almost walking by now?
At this, John Smith lowered his head again.
I was wrong. I'll make it up to you from now on.
There is no from now on, John Smith.
Sarah, the baby is gone. Our baby is gone. I'm so sorry, Sarah.
As he spoke, he began to cry, tears streaming down his face.
What did you say? My baby is gone?
I clutched my stomach. Whether it was my imagination or not, it did feel flatter. My baby is gone. The child I had longed for was gone.
Why? Why?
I cried uncontrollably. John Smith reached out to wipe my tears, but I turned my head away to avoid him.
John Smith, get out. I don't want to see you anymore.
His hand hung in the air for a moment before he withdrew it.
All right, Sarah. If you don't want to see me now, I'll leave. I'll make sure someone takes good care of you. Please don't be upset.
I remained silent, waiting until John Smith left. The doctor told me that my body hadn't been in good condition, and the baby was already a miracle. Now, because of my emotional turmoil, I had accidentally lost it. It would be difficult to conceive again in the future. That might have been my only child in this lifetime. Yes, my only child was gone. The ones responsible were me, John Smith, and Emily Johnson. We were all to blame. During the days I spent in the hospital, John Smith visited a few times, but I never acknowledged him. He would sit by my bed, talking to himself.
I got promoted, Sarah. I can earn a lot of money now. I've also seen many beautiful places. Once you're discharged, we can go traveling.
He said so many things that, in the past, would have made me kiss him and dream about visiting those places with him. But now, his words stirred no emotions in me, I only felt annoyed. Finally, on his third visit, I spoke.
John Smith, leave. I don't want to see you. Once I'm discharged, we will get a divorce.
John Smith tried to persuade me again and again, but I had already made up my mind. I knew he didn't love Emily Johnson, I knew he loved me deeply. But he had a child with Emily Johnson, and just thinking about it made me feel disgusted. This rift between us could never be mended. After being discharged from the hospital, Sarah Williams returned home and took out her already packed luggage. She drafted the divorce agreement, intending to take a significant portion of the assets.
I once believed that love alone could provide a good life. Now, I realize I can't rely on anyone but myself and money.
She waited for John Smith to come back and handed him the agreement she had prepared.
Take a look. If you have no objections, just sign it.
Sarah, do you really want a divorce?
Yes, stop wasting time. If you have no objections, just sign it.
John threw the divorce agreement on the ground.
I don't agree, Sarah. Marriage involves two people, and so does divorce. I won't agree to it.
John, let's not make this any uglier than it has to be, okay?
Sarah, I truly know I was wrong. I was really drunk back then, and I regretted it immediately. After Emily Johnson returned to the country, I had no feelings for her, and nothing happened between us again. Every time I went to see her, it was only because Yao Yao was my daughter, and I need to be responsible for her.
His daughter. Yes, he has a daughter now, but Sarah's child is gone.
John, this is the result of long consideration. If you won't sign it, then we'll see each other in court.
She grabbed her suitcase and was about to leave when John grabbed her hand again, looking at her pleadingly.
Sarah, don't leave me. I'm begging you. I only want you.
John, don't disgust me.
She shook off his hand, picked up her luggage, and left. Looking at him, she felt no emotional stirrings at all. The next time Sarah saw John, she brought her lawyer to his house. She didn't want to delay the divorce any longer. She didn't want to have any more ties with him. She rang the doorbell, and John opened the door. In just a few days, he looked like a completely different person. He had lost a lot of weight, his beard had grown out, and he looked very unkempt.
Do I feel sorry for him? Not at all. He deserves it.
She sat across from John.
This time, let's discuss the divorce properly.
Her lawyer placed the divorce agreement in front of John.
Sir, this is the divorce agreement we have prepared. Please take a look.
Without saying a word, John took it and signed it. He looked up at Sarah, his eyes bloodshot.
Sarah, I agree to the divorce. You can have all the assets.
Sarah was surprised at his decisiveness but more relieved. She forced a smile.
All right.
She didn't refuse, he owed her this.
John, if there are no issues, let's meet at the Civil Affairs office tomorrow.
Okay.
He looked ahead with empty eyes, surprisingly decisive. Sarah glanced at him, feeling indescribable emotions.
I felt a bit of a pang. It turns out I wasn't as heartless as I thought. I still hadn't moved on.
She watched his back as she silently left. She didn't know if she still loved him or hated him. The next day, John Smith was up before me, a cigarette glowing red in his hand.
John, you're up early.
As I approached, I noticed several cigarette butts at his feet, probably 7 or 8.
John Smith.
Upon hearing my voice, he immediately discarded the cigarette and stomped it out, then let out a cold laugh as if remembering something.
Sarah, I haven't smoked in years. Remember how I quit for you?
During high school and college, John Smith had a significant smoking habit, but the smell always bothered me.
Yes, I remember. You quit when you proposed to me.
I did it for you. But now,
seeing him smoke, I felt I shouldn't care anymore. After all, this man would soon have nothing to do with me.
Let's go.
Today, John Smith wore the same outfit he had on our wedding day, and he had shaved his beard. For a moment, it felt like we were back to when we first got married.
So many people getting divorced. We waited a long time for our turn.
I thought I would be happy, relieved, and free once I got the divorce certificate. But I wasn't. Holding the divorce certificate, I still felt a pang of sadness.
From childhood to adulthood, I had only ever loved John Smith. Besides him, I had never had feelings for anyone else.
I thought we would grow old together. But that was just my wishful thinking.
Sarah, let's talk.
There's nothing left to say.
John Smith and I walked out together. I didn't want to look back or say another word to him.
Sarah Williams, we're divorced now because it makes you happy, but it's not because I don't love you. Sarah, I will win you back.
I paused, sighed, and said nothing more. There was no chance. He had no chance to win me back because there was Emily Johnson between us, a chasm we could never cross in this lifetime.
Moreover, the company is sending me abroad for 5 years. I might never see him again.
5 years is a long time, long enough to forget the pain.
Later, I indeed never fell in love with anyone else. I devoted myself to my work, earned a lot of money, and achieved great success.
5 years later, I returned home and met someone suitable for marriage.
Yes, suitable for marriage, but I didn't love him.
One needs a companion in life. Otherwise, it would be too lonely.
I was a coward. I was afraid of the dark and afraid of being alone.
I met this person, Michael Brown. We had actually known each other for a long time.
Sarah, I've always cared for you.
We were in the same club in college. He didn't know I had a boyfriend and confessed to me, but I told him my situation and turned him down.
After I returned home, I met him again. When he learned I was divorced, he started pursuing me once more. He was a good person.
I know you don't think you can love anyone anymore. But it's okay, I'm confident I can make you love me.
So, we got married.
On our wedding day, I saw John Smith. It was the first time I had seen him since returning home. I hadn't invited him to the wedding, but he appeared as a guest.
As the officiant read the vows, I looked away, and Michael Brown kissed me.
After the ceremony, I looked at the guest seats again, but he was already gone.
John Smith and I were completely over, with no further entanglements.